I never wanted to make a video about this, but here we are. This is my weird version of a Kayla Says video. I thought this Reynos gin would be appropriate for the occasion. We love you, Emma, even though now you decided to play pickleball for some godforsaken reason. With the publication of 3 viral Dramione fanfiction turned traditionally published works, the controversial ship has gotten a lot of attention in a way that sits at multiple intersections of what I talk about on this channel. And I am both someone who has liked Dramione for a very, very long time and very vocally anti JK Rowling and supporting her because of her transphobia. So it's a lot of things for me, including frustrating. So that's why I decided I'll just do a video about it. I will be taking all the ad revenue from this video and I will be donating it because I find it uncomfortable to make any more money talking about Harry Potter, especially talking about a Harry Potter ship. So I will be taking any ads and I will be attaching a fundraiser to this video. I will be putting half of my sponsorship money towards that. The other half's going to go towards taxes. And then I will also be donating any ad revenue this video gets to charity. For my own sake and the sake of clarity in this video, it is going to be kind of heavily time-stamped and pedantic because as much as people say they dislike videos with countless caveats, the lack of good faith, lack of media literacy, and the general allergy to disagreement without malice is exhausting. So we're going to just cut that out of here. And to just further clarify, this video is not here to convince you to feel any type of way about this particular ship at the focus of this discussion. It is here to have a broader discussion about fandom politics, and the way in which book talk, modern publication, and J.K. Rowling have all interwoven to create a situation that has led fandom to become even less of a safe space than it usually is, and much more capitalistic. Having just done an entire video about J.K. Rowling's transphobia, I don't have a desire to go through all the same points since that video was the length of him. So here are the broad strokes. Since around 2018 to 2019, the author of Harry Potter, Joanne Rowling, has committed herself to being a full-time anti-trans activist and has made commitments to use her private money to fund legal teams that will make things harder for trans women, and also has helped put money behind lawsuits. She has started the J.K. Rowling Women's Fund, and it is inspired by Athena. Yeah, that one. Quote, J.K. Rowling set up the JKRWF in order to empower women as they fight for their sex-based rights. Her inspiration was Athena, or Pallas, the Greek goddess of wisdom and war, who believed warfare should only be used to protect the people and achieve justice. Athena's symbol, incorporated into the JKRWF logo, signifies a shield and a woman, which seemed appropriate to the aims of the fund, giving women the means to protect themselves against oppression and unfairness. Athena, huh? Someone should tell Arachne about this development. I also came across a TikTok creator about a month ago who was trying to nitpick the actual harm being done by JKR. This particular person, who I will not name here, but if you follow me on TikTok, you saw my back and forth with them. And they spoke about how Harry Potter was a comfort to him because of what's happening in the world, including the genocide in Gaza. Mind you, JKR did not want to ban the sale of her books in Israel when called to under the BDS movement. And I found the framing of those two things, Harry Potter and the escapism of that work, in the context of the genocide in Gaza, to be almost painful because it just speaks to how people do not understand cultural genocide. The anti-trans legislation is actively making it so that trans people and non-binary people cannot live safe public lives. It pushes them into the closet, into stealth, into living smaller, quieter versions of themselves for the sake of this imperialistic paternalism that has been used across time and eternity to assimilate cultures into cultural genocide. It is the banning of the tartan. It is the criminalization of the Irish language. It is the cutting of braids and removing Indigenous children from their communities. It is the criminalization of tribal tattoos and stigmatizing them in the public space. It is the social implication that speaking a certain way and dressing a certain way signifies your sexual, ethnic, and cultural difference with pride is a danger to the status quo. J.K. Rowling makes her money from the continued support of her work. The parks, the play, the books, the games, and the show. All of those things show publishers, studios, etc., that despite her politics, the brand of Harry Potter sustains itself beyond her. And no matter what you as an individual may think of her politics, it isn't stopping the bag. And it is worth repeating for the 10,000th time that J.K. Rowling did go from being a billionaire to a millionaire. And that post COVID, despite her transphobia, people have continued to support her and she has gone back to being a billionaire. That is why people, especially trans people, have been asking since the beginning to think about their passive consumerism and passive support of Harry Potter. They asked for that before ever asking for some organized boycott. LGBTQ plus Potterheads were and have remained some of the loudest, biggest, and most fanatical supporters of the IP, still wanted to have some kind of fandom experience and to have those hard conversations about the reality of what she was doing and how to have those conversations in addition to talking about the gender, race, and world building issues of her works. And many have continued to do so. The sad reality is that for as many people who say that they care and may be against Rowling's politics, it has not stopped them from buying licensed work and showing excitement over it, and also downplaying the impact of what she is doing. I feel for like the last few months, there has been an endless stream of Potter related tie-in advertisement, like from nails to donuts to like all kinds of other bullshit. On top of that, the ever-increasing harm to trans people in the UK, US, and many other places, there is a chip on the shoulder of many who, in light of that, still feel like they're being harassed and attacked over their attachment to this series. The inability to decenter their own nostalgia and escapism when the creator of their escapism is doing tangibly, clearly recorded things with her money that does harm is a problem. As someone who grew up with a massive love of Harry Potter, was a massive fan, wrote tons of articles, deep dives about it. It was a really huge part of my pop culture spoken language. In the aftermath of what J.K. Rowling has done, the fandom aspect of it had been the place where I allowed myself to enjoy a little bit of what I had left of it. And if you had asked me, even when I did my Harry Potter video just a few months ago, if fan fiction and fandom were doing as much harm as licensed Harry Potter works, I would have said no. I would have said that fandom is for us, a community and a space that we have helped build. And despite the fact that it is imperfect, for us to just fully leave it would make it worse and seed ground to more political apathy around Harry Potter. I would have argued that there is still value in this being a popular IP and having people in that space who are being critical of it and dismantling the power structures behind it. This year of Dramione stuff has really burnt that for me.
Draco, there are other options. You know, it is time that you look inside yourself and figured out what it is that you really want.
I want a mining Granger and a rocket ship.
I need more gin for this. All right, so Hermione is the popular fanfiction pairing between Draco Malfoy and Hermione Granger from the Harry Potter series. As of the latest AO3 pairing statistics, it is the fourth most popular ship in the fandom to create new fanworks, overtaking Drarry, Draco and Harry, for the first time, and is the second most popular hetero ship in that fandom after James and Lily Potter, which beat Jegulus, which is James Potter and Regulus Black. Recession indicators all around, honestly. Although we finally got a femme slash couple breaking the top 5. So let's celebrate that. You know, we almost had 2 in like the top 10. Rio and Agatha were like right there. I have been a Dramione shipper in some way or form probably since Goblet of Fire. I will get into this later on. And it was always kind of popular, but on the fringes. Shipping trends come and go. There used to be literal wars that were announced on the news about Hermione and who she was going to end up with, Harry or Ron. Ginny and Draco were actually quite a popular ship pairing, most during the early 2000s. And the Draco trilogy, which was written by Cassandra Clare, was the inspiration for the Mortal Instrument series, which she then made. Over the last few years, Hermione has gotten very popular on online spaces, especially TikTok. Along with the rise of romantasy and the guardrails around fanfiction becoming lax, a lot of people started reading and recommending fanfiction the same way they did regular books on Book Talk. That is not unique to Hermione. The Marauders fandom runs the Harry Potter streets overwhelmingly, but of course, with Hermione being a heterosexual ship, it has the built-in marketability to a certain cishet audience. This This led to two things: a lot of illegal bookbinding and a surge in really toxic interactions between fanfiction writers and new fanfiction readers. Fanfiction exists in a legal gray area. It is taking the copyrighted material of someone else's work and playing with those characters, creating storylines. Most fanfiction writers will defend their use of fanfiction by citing fair use and claiming the following: that fan works do not deprive the owner of the source material of income, that fan works may work as free advertisement and promotion of the original source material, that fan works are usually nonprofit, fan works do not copy or attempt to substitute for the original work. This is why people used to write disclaimers at the top of those stories saying this work is the property of author and this work is not affiliated with them. Most authors do not accept and will not admit to reading fan fiction, and some notoriously have hated it in the past, including George R. R. Martin, Anne Rice, and Robin Hobb. But fair use, as any YouTuber will tell you, is a case-by-case basis, and depending on the company, if they really do want to sue and pursue it. Binding fan fiction and selling it complicates the issue of fair use, especially when you're doing fan fiction for books. Now you are taking a work that is directly inspired and using the IP of someone else and making a tangible profit off of it. Add on to the fact that the person doing it is usually not even the original fanfiction author, and you have a potentially massive legal issue. Fanfiction is also meant to be free for anyone to consume. It is not meant to be read and dissected and distributed in the way that an original piece of fiction would be. Hence why putting it on Storygraphs or Goodreads is problematic. It's kind of ruining the point. A huge part of the world building you are reading is the world building of the original source material. You are going into it with someone else doing the initial work of constructing the world and characters. And you want to see people write and do things for fun using headcanons or with their interpretation of characters, their own interest in what they want to explore. Treating someone writing a long work in progress slow burn with a few beta readers doing it for love of the game, the same as a person who has editors, a team, and is getting paid to do this work, makes zero sense. Now, have people taken their fan fiction idea, polished it up, reworked it completely, and used the lessons they learned from that to make original fiction? Yes, and that is a legitimate transformation. You Again, which I'm looking at my shelf right now, is one of my favorite books I read a few years ago, and I had no idea it was allegedly based on a Raylo fanfiction. It's a contemporary romance. There's zero space. And for those who know, are in community with Raylo, it's a fun in-joke. When the Love Hypothesis movie was announced and Daisy Ridley's actual husband was cast as the male lead, it was quite a moment of seeing how thin the fourth wall was becoming in terms of these fan works and original fiction, and how blurred that line is becoming. Part of how that was beginning to get blurred is when certain fics broke containment or became more popular to the average person. Starting around 2022, there was a lot of online popularity around both Dramione and the Marauders fics. Just so people know, the Marauders fanfiction universe has its own lore and has changed and evolved, with certain characters becoming more popular, certain ships becoming more well known, and it usually centers around the era of James Potter and his friends and those they would have been at Hogwarts with during their era of school. The two fanfictions that led to break containment were Manacled from the Dramione side and All the Young Dudes from the Marauders side. Manacled was a fanfiction by Sinlin Yu that was an alternative universe fic about a world in which Voldemort won the Wizarding War. It takes elements from The Handmaid's Tale and mixes them within the Wizarding world, centered around the Muggle-born and Blood Trader women being given to those in the Dark Lord Circle as slaves, essentially. And Hermione is given to Draco. There's a lot of more stuff going on there, but that's the gist of it. It is a very dark examination of gender and politics. The Sinlin Yu has talked about this at length. Contrasting, All the Young Dudes by Miss King Bean 89 is a reimagining of Remus Lupin during his Hogwarts years, about him falling in love with Sirius Black, and as the title indicates, uses a lot of music from the 70s to tell a coming-of-age story for these characters. It is pretty much a foundational headcanon for a lot of the modern Marauder fan base and has had a huge impact in the LGBTQ fandom spaces because of how it deals with multiple queer identities and relationships, and the headcanons there have kind of become the headcanons for everyone. Both of these stories were already popular and had been around, but especially in the 2022 and 2023 post-pandemic years, people began binding these works and selling them complete with fan art by artists that were not being compensated for either their artwork or the original writing. This was a huge issue that people were complaining about because while it was an issue in some other fandoms, it was taking place primarily in the Harry Potter fandom, and that was already not a great look considering everyone knew that J.K. Rowling was a transphobe. And to me, it certainly feels very tinfoil hat that right as J.K. Rowling was growing in notoriety, we were also seeing the fandom spaces getting taken over by book talkers who aren't necessarily interested in these books for characters, but how they fit into archetypes in popular book trends like romantasy and dark academia. All this really peaked in 2023-24 when several Dramione fanfiction writers, in response to people continuing to download and sell their works, either made those works private or removed their works entirely. As silly as this may sound, some really great character pieces were lost, a lot of works that really helped build that fanfiction space. And I know this sounds very trite, but I think it's important to put that into the context of what we're speaking about and why this entire thing has been very frustrating is that these fanfiction writers have done a lot of work to reshape these characters in a way that is more fulfilling in their minds than the original work. They were putting it in, and there are certain terms, lexicon that have no root in serious development in canon, and they did wholesale, and they put a lot of effort into it. And even if they never wanted to publish it, they were still doing really incredible pieces of work, and that deserved to be recognized. And it sucks that because of capitalism and people taking something that was free and deciding to market it and sell it to fit into these niche spaces that we lost some of those things. And even if they do end up becoming published later on, I still think that's fucked up. They should have been allowed to just be there and be free. Along with Manacled, two of the other popular works included in this kind of entire thing were The Auction and Draco Malfoy and the Mortifying Ordeal of Being in Love. The Auction is the third installment of the Rights and Wrongs trilogy by Julie Soda, I'll use her published name, and the first two are kind of office romance, post-Hogwarts story AUs about Hermione and Draco working together to create change within the wizarding world, with Hermione using her status and passion and Draco's wealth to start a legal firm to help pass laws to help magical creatures. In both of those stories, one from Hermione's perspective and one from Draco's, something is brought up called the auction, which is something that would have happened if Voldemort won, and Draco contemplating having to buy Hermione in order to protect her. The auction fanfiction is exploring that storyline seriously in a way that is similar to Manacled. It is also important to know that Manacled is not just a Harry Potter AU, it is also taking from The Handmaid's Tale, which was very popular in the cultural zeitgeist at this time. And contrastingly, again, Draco Malfoy and the Mortifying Ordeal of Being in Love is a buddy comedy kind of about Draco working as an aura, which is like a wizarding cop, providing security for Hermione, who is, instead of being, part of the system, is like a renowned healer working on a potion that could help change the wizarding world. Spoiler alert, it's a cure for lycanthropy. It really is a great story. Those three works were then announced as being traditionally published, with two of them being published at the same time, and the version of Manacled, Alchemized, being pushed back to a few days ago. Now, as mentioned before, the idea of filing off serial numbers of a work and tweaking it so that it is now original fiction is not new. 50 Shades of Grey, all the Wattpad, After Stories, Cassandra Clare, etc. But with the publication of these three works, all within the same year, what we saw was, for the first time, a massive discussion about fanfictions turned traditionally published that used the IP very heavily in its marketing, while that IP was controlled by a very powerful and problematic individual that still makes a lot of money on that IP. And mind you, if we go back to the concept of fair use that allows fanfiction to exist, one of the things it cites is that fan works may work as free advertisement and promotion of the original source material. So the first real issue that came up was the now deleted Edelweiss marketing graphic that explained to booksellers what Dramione was, using the Harry Potter IP explicitly and showing the illegally bound fan fiction on another, and then also highlighting other works that have popular fanfiction roots inspired by Reylo, the Hurricane Wars, and the Love Hypothesis. It is, in my opinion, extremely legally weird to do this and just promotionally weird. Not only are you explicitly tying your book to someone else's property, intellectual property, which is already so popular that most people who are in the know would clock the archetype, like pale blonde man and dark-haired woman, not unique, you know? Like, I've seen Draco Malfoy alts in the world, okay? You don't need to tell the cows they're on a cow farm, but you're making it very clear that you are attempting to use a built-in fan base of readers and fans of Harry Potter broadly to market this original work. And it casts doubt into the minds of people who are tapped in if this is actually an original work. Even if JKR was not a transphobe, this would be very messy. Just because Stephanie Meyer never sued E.L. James doesn't mean she couldn't have. It just wouldn't have been popular or really worth it. By doing this so explicitly, it has created even more conspiracy around the authors and really alienated them in some spaces. People are wondering if there were backdoor deals, if there are conversations about if these are actually retooled works, how they stand on their own, but also about Harry Potter and Hermione and Rowling, with none of the articles that talked about this really covering this topic and getting into the root of anything meaningful while putting a spotlight on this fan base already dealing with enough shit. And while I am sure there are more, there were 3 articles I think caused the most amount of strife and attention. One from the Washington Post, one from the New York Times, and one from Harper's Bazaar. And it is just so weird to think that they all wrote about fan fiction. The Harper's Bazaar article came out in July of 2025 titled The Irresistible Urge to Fall for Dramione Fan Fiction, and it is written from the perspective of someone who did, like myself, enjoy this ship ages ago and gushes over all the reason people like it in terms of tropes. It features interview quotes from Bridget Knightley, who wrote The Irresistible Urge to Fall for Your Enemy and is known for the pre-mentioned fanfiction Draco Malfoy and the Mortifying Ordeal of Being in Love, and Julie Soto, who wrote Rose and Chains from the auction. And it also features comments from other people who enjoy the ship and Mel Thomas, a video essayist, to explain the appeal of fan fiction. It does, towards the end, finally mention J.K. Rowling's transphobia and asks the authors about this. Now, it must be said that J.K. Rowling's online presence and anti-trans activism in the UK have made Harry Potter fandom a ... thorny situation, to put it mildly. For those who are in opposition to her beliefs, there's no question that they can no longer support her. But beyond that, there is very little agreement on what divestment from Harry Potter should look like. There's broad agreement that anything with the potential to put more money in her pockets and thus fund her anti-trans crusades should be boycotted. So, no buying new video games, no watching the forthcoming HBO show, no visiting the various theme parks. And there are some who believe you can still read the books or watch the movies so long as you aren't paying for them. And there are others who believe even that signifies a support of the author's beliefs. And some feel that reading Harry Potter fanfic, which makes Rowling no money, is also too much, arguing that engaging in fandom at all perpetuates the popularity of Harry Potter and keeps her empire alive. Rowling, not Rowling. Row. This makes it a tense moment to release anything related to Harry Potter, even novels that are several layers removed from JKR's wallet. On Book Threads and Book Talk, a handful of creators have expressed discomfort or even anger that these titles are using Harry Potter as a marketing tool, stating that they will not be reading the original works. Both Soto and Knightley express a complete understanding of the situation. I don't write in the Harry Potter fandom anymore. If an idea strikes me, I might. And I don't agree with her views and how she chooses to spend her influence and her money. I hope that through my work, people can read that we have different viewpoints on things, Soto says. I appreciate anyone who doesn't want to interact with the franchise at all anymore, and I think that's a completely valid decision, and it's valid if you don't want to read any of the traditionally published books that had to start there. I don't think I can think of a single Harry Potter fanfic author that I know that isn't clearly a trans ally or anti-TERF. We acknowledge that there's a problem, but we're here to play in this sandbox, reclaim these spaces, Knightley adds, and fanfic has always been a place for more marginalized voices to play. I did appreciate that the article does eventually point out that the LGBTQ fics, like all the young dudes, haven't been pulled for publication, despite the queer ships in Harry Potter being amongst the most popular all the time. It is bittersweet to see, because fanfic to me has always been queer and trans. For queer fiction writers, really only in the past 10 years has there been a lot of queer romance to choose from in TradPub. So before then, a lot of people were relying on fic, and still are, Thomas says. Fanfic is not just IP slop. Often it's loving criticism, and that's what All the Young Dudes is. Such a beautiful example of an infusion of original ideas in a world that's familiar, but it goes way beyond what you thought would have been possible, and that makes the subtext text. What myself and I think a lot of others found frustrating is that it feels like even the need to put the politics as mildly, it feels like the language of the story is not meeting the moment. To have a gushing article about redemption and the transformative power of love and the whole enemies to lovers of it, but not being able to take a really strong stance within the article makes Soto and Knightley's comments read as weak, especially since they are followed by a queer trans person saying that queer trans works are not being given the same platform and support. After all, we're not talking about queer works, we're talking about a cishet ship. Even within this transformative ally space, it's still not giving those stories an equal spotlight, and that inherently is a problem. The next article is Publishing's Affair with Fanfiction has a new star couple, Dramione. And I have to say, fangirl Janine clocked this a couple years ago, so Janine, next time I see you, you're getting a drink on me. And this article is from the Washington Post, which the fact that it's even getting published in the Post is times so many recession indicators. Heterosexual fan fiction ships in the Washington Post. Now, I think the previous article was clumsy, but I think this WAPO article is where the real messiness begins, because I think it was handled probably in between the backlash, because again, it features Soto and Knightley talking about being pulled into publishing their work because of how successful it was on AO3, that it was something special, and that reworking it would be worth their time and energy. On paper, publishing's embrace of Germani fan fiction seems like a smart business move, but it's not without risks. Harry Potter author Rowling. J.K. Rowling's controversial statements about transgender people have led some readers to swear off anything to do with that universe, including these new novels. That's the case for Tori Jarrett, a longtime romance reader and former Harry Potter fan who has estranged herself completely from the franchise. I don't begrudge anyone that is comfortable enough to read these books. I guess for me, it doesn't matter how separated it is. Even one person picking up Harry Potter for the first time and putting money into Rowling's pockets because they read Hermione fanfiction and got curious, that's one person too many for me. While I can commend this article for addressing the transphobia sooner, it still frames her actions as just being controversial comments about transgender people. What follows that are quotes from Soto and Knightley that do not help. It is extremely disheartening, Soto says, and frankly makes me angry to have something that I love tarnished like this, in not only my eyes, but everyone's eyes. But I think also a lot of times fan fiction is an act of resistance against the created material. For Knightley, too, fan fiction is a way to take back ownership of a series she once loved that has now been tainted by the author's views and behaviors. This article is very short to his detriment, but it is elevated by the comments made by Jarrett. If we were really trying to reclaim something and take it away, we wouldn't be still utilizing that intellectual property to try and bring in readers and market it. Correct. And they also use another quote by Jennifer Duggan, an English professor specializing in fan fiction young adult literature, who says, I mean, that smart, nerdy girl and the tortured bad boy are not exactly new ideas, frankly. They are stereotypical characters, right? So the very nature of creative work is that we build and adapt and work with what we know. And I just want to say this. This is an ad lib. I just want to say this. I hate that description because that is not Hermione. I'm gonna get into my screed later, but I feel like that is such a misinterpretation of Hermione. Draco is not a tortured bad boy. He is not. He is a very spoiled rich kid. He's not tortured until book 6. And that's when he joins the wizard bad boys. Like, he's not a bad boy. He's not a tortured bad boy. Draco Lucius? Draco Lucius Malfoy. Bad boy? He he is slightly more attractive Randall from Recess. Like, and Randall is Percy Weasley. But anyway, that's not the point. The point is that what Jarrett says rings true. It is no longer fully transformative if every conversation we have about it is tied to the original intellectual property. And that's why it feels like less of a filing off serial numbers and more of a light scrape, because it could have been done better. The final article we will discuss is from the New York Times. Why magic, dragons, and explicit sex are in bookstores everywhere. Where. This is really good gin, actually. Good job, Emma. This article starts off with an anecdote about a 28-year-old estate agent and content creator finding the Hermione hashtag on TikTok and finding out about the fanfiction Manacled and becoming hooked on it. She got tattoos of imagery from Manacled, a constellation on her shoulder and a hummingbird on her ankle. She read the books half a dozen times, and when she wasn't reading it, she was listening to a fan-made audio recording of the story on triple speed to get to the best parts faster. Her friends gave her a 3-volume, a 1,188-page bound edition of Manacled for her birthday. She started a Manacled book club and pressed the story on anyone who would listen. That is the beginning of most of my nightmares. And again, I have to say, when you hear people talk about it like that, you would not believe that it is a emotionally complex examination of like gender and power and trauma, because everyone talks about it in these articles like it's, fucking haunted Adeline. Like they talk about it like it's fucking like, oh my god, I'm just having a great time, hummingbirds and stars, and it's like, yeah, there's also like rape in it, and it's like whatever. It's like they talk about it in such an unserious way for a book that is trying to be taken seriously. Now, in this discussion about the popularity of romantasy and Manacled, it mentions Sinlin Yu, the author of Manacled, and its descendant Alchemize, talking in events. But of the 3 authors who are doing these Hermione stories, outside of their author events, Sin and Yu, for the most part, had not been talking in these articles. This Times piece was one of the first, and they had a few others come out. They also now have a film deal through Legendary, which is a lot. And it's a lot, and it's creating. I feel almost. I had a lot of complicated feelings about Sin and Yu. We'll get into them in the ramble, but the important things to kind of know in general is that they are 34 years old. They identify as non-binary and they use they them pronouns. They are half Japanese. Their mother was born in an internment camp, and they grew up in a Christian household in the Pacific Northwest, the middle child of an evangelical pastor and a former ballerina, and that they were homeschooled and cut off from mainstream popular culture, and much later in life found Harry Potter. Sinlin Yu said writing Harry Potter fan fiction felt like a way to defy Miss Rowling and reclaim the characters, but still send worries and might look like an endorsement and isn't sure about posting more Hermione stories. I don't want it to be misconstrued that I'm trying to promote her or aligning with her views, they said. Towards the end, we get quotes from people saying that for them, the fanfiction is what they are a fan of, not even the original IP. This is their way of enjoying it without directly supporting the original intellectual property. The article also crunches the numbers, showing that Rose in Chains and Urge debuted as New York Times #1 and 2 bestsellers, respectively, and that part of the appeal for publishers is getting to keep this audience of aged Harry Potter fans. Oh, Maron. The Hermione craze took off during the pandemic, crossing into the mainstream when book talk influencers discovered the stories. People were boasting about these fanfiction stories like they were novels, said the literary agent Alyssa Morris, who christened 2025 the year of Hermione. While it's illegal to sell fanfiction about copyrighted works, fans wanted copies on their shelves, and a market developed for bound copies with elaborately designed covers that look indistinguishable from real books. There's this whole secret economy of Dramione fanfiction, Miss Morris said. It was only a matter of time before publishers and agents took notice. Now Dramione stories, which come conveniently prepackaged with large and devoted audiences, are migrating from niche corners of the internet to the aisles of bookstores and big box chains. I'm gonna have to get this to Scoob to edit. I'm gonna get this to Scoob. I made a decision. For me personally, this is kind of gross. Call me crazy, but not everything is about money. It just speaks to a fundamental lack of trust, and in my mind, calls into question the faith behind these books. Yes, they are successful because you picked the best of the bunch of the three and used it heavily in your marketing, but that has also impacted the writers. Romance Con has been an unmitigated shit show because of not just having Julie Soto being involved, but mischief managed as well. Authors have been in really big arguments about this whole issue. Trans and non binary people have overwhelmingly not been given space to lead this conversation. The one non binary author who is not white has spoken overwhelmingly the least and has had the most reason, oddly enough, to even go from fan fiction traditionally published in the first place. Because to be quite fair, like, a lot of people are reheating Manacle's nachos. A lot of people are trying to do what Manacle is doing. And again, it's frustrating when you read the interviews with Scylla and you, and you hear them talk about the material and you hear them discuss these issues. It is very, very clear that they had a very clear artistic vision of this fan fiction that has largely been ignored by the fan base. And it is just very sad. While these books have made money, will continue to probably make money, it has done a lot of damage in a lot of other ways to these authors. Other authors in the space, it has made the fanfiction community less safe, and it has once again shown that the safety of transgender people and those in that umbrella are not as important as the ability to still use the Harry Potter intellectual property to make money. Because again, you did not need to do that to sell these books. Like, all of these books could have done well without Dramione, but Dramione was a part of everything. And I know this has been divisive, and this is just like an ad lib, but I'm going to say it. I think it would have been one thing for the authors to hint and talk about the Dramione impact, like influence of their books, and still be very clear that they disagree with J.K. Rowling. It's another thing to have the publishers send Edelweiss graphics of it. RIP the fourth wall. In January of 2024, the New York Times published an article titled, "Look What We Made Taylor Swift Do," a guest opinion article by Anna Marks that is about gay lore. I know. You're like, what does this have to do with anything? You wait. The June and I we have a plan. We're talking. This moment in history was special, but it was one of those breaking containment moments because, yes, as someone who is chronically online, has gay friends, and is in community with white women, I know about the theories of Taylor Swift being a secret lesbian, but I'm supposed to know that information, even if it was against my will, okay? I have the copy of Tavi Gevinson's gay lore self-insert fanfiction bound. I have it. I'll put a picture in it in the video because I forgot to grab it earlier because, again, we've been planning this for some time. For the New York Times to have a writer publish an article with a passage like this. In September, the singer Maren Morris stepped away from country music. She said she did so in part because of the industry's lingering anti-queerness. If country music hasn't changed enough, what's to say that the larger entertainment industry, and by extension our broader culture, has? Periodically, I return to a video recorded by a shaky hand more than a decade ago of Miss Wright answering questions at a Borders bookstore about her coming out. She likens closeted stardom to a blender, an insane and inhumane heteronormative machine in which queer artists are chewed into bits. It's going to keep going, Miss Wright says, until someone who has something to lose stands up and just says, I'm gay. Somebody big. She continues, we need our heroes. What if someone had already tried, at least once, to change the culture by becoming such a hero? What if, because our culture had yet to come to terms with homophobia, it wasn't ready for her? What if that hero's name was Taylor Allison? Like, and my own biases aside, the Gaylord community is a community. They have their own language, their own lore, timelines, receipts, proof, and rationale for why they feel as they do. It is more problematic that Taylor Swift is a real billionaire person, but putting that to the side, what is gained by having the paper of record publish something about gay lore? It is not for everyone. It doesn't have to be. The fourth wall is the only wall we really need. And I mean this truly and spiritually, Gaylors. Y'all have to get to AO3 because the WLW community needs this energy. Y'all need to be #1 on the charts next year. And with Taylor Swift's own politics constantly being up for debate, it doesn't help to have so much queer feminist talking points surrounding a person who can never live up to the expectations of what people want. Fandom is the sandbox, but someone can always take a massive dump in it. Harry Potter is one of those series that has a massive fandom. Even after all these years after publication, because of the marketing investment that was made to turn things like the different houses, wands, robes, etc., into things that people could have attachment towards, it has survived. It has enough mythology and lore and canon to appeal to readers on multiple levels, with all of them participating in the same capitalism without needing to care with the same intensity. As I mentioned in my longer video, since JKR's transphobia has become mainstream, there has been this tension about what the future of the Harry Potter fandom was going to be, especially since there had always been a very large queer fan base. People talk about the roots of fandom being queerness, and while that is not the case for every single fandom, even at a glance, look at AO3 will show you that queer relationships make up the majority of shipping. There is a lot that could be said about the politics of that as well, but that is outside the scope of this video. Let me know if you want me to do something about it. I'm open to it. The Jin and I were always coming up with ideas. Actually, I haven't been drinking that much. But anyway, part of what happens within fandom, and even more specific niche spaces, is that it will evolve within itself. For example, there are huge splits in terms of the Marauders community before all the young dudes and after, in terms of what characters were the most popular, how certain characters were depicted within Marauders canon, which is already different from what exists in the book canon. There have also been very popular fan depictions and headcanons, half Indian Harry has been really popular. I've seen some popularity around Ron as a trans man, which is really interesting, and Hermione either being mixed race or being given a difference in her skin color, being made to look more tan. This is largely a reaction that came after the Cursed Child play, which has depicted Hermione as being a Black British person. But nonetheless, that has become sort of visual archetypes for the characters that exist. These are ways of taking a series that is overall not that diverse, and even when there is diversity, it's poorly handled, and evolving it to meet the audience. Part of the reason why Harry Potter has remained so popular as a subject for fan fiction is because I think that most fans of the series who would be in the higher tiers of fandom understand how unsatisfying a lot of aspects of the franchise are. Let's not forget the most popular relationships in the franchise are queer ones. When the only canonically gay characters in the series are Wizard Hitler, Take One, and defected wizard supremacist Gandalf Dumbledore. They also include characters that have very little character development or incomplete character development. They died early or had unrealized potential, etc. And when it comes down to it, the things that draw people to those ships have very little to do with what JKR wrote, but the bones of what she didn't write. Is there a genuine issue with the way a lot of fans, especially white cis female fans, sort of create and hypersexualize the Death Eaters in a romantic way? Yes. But let's not forget that JKR's favorite and most complex character is Severus Snape, a man who is literally a Death Eater for love and bullies children. Yeah, that's a great character. Not only that, but in every conversation about Draco Malfoy, Regulus Black, and the Slytherin house as a whole, Rowling would talk about it in much more nuanced and complex ways than the books actually depicted them. She would constantly reiterate that not all Slytherin were bad, but then sends the entire house to the dungeons during the final battle, gives hints of Draco not being fully committed to the Death Eaters, but will not allow him to have any active role in the final battle. That goes to his mother, who exists to be a mother. I know everyone laughs about people taking a character like Regulus Black, who exists for like a page, and turning him into this kind of like deeply complex character because women love fascists. And like, I get it, right? But like, let's seriously talk about it. Like, that's what we do on this channel. Like, let's be real about this. In the Half-Blood Prince, clearer in the book than in the movie, a character named Regulus Black is explored. He is the younger brother of Sirius Black, and unlike his older brother, Regulus toes the family line and ends up becoming a Death Eater at 16 years old. He has doubts about serving, but it is after Voldemort uses his family's house elf creature and leaves him for dead that Regulus steals the Slytherin locket, which is a Horcrux. He dies in the process, and his brother never cares about this and just assumes he got in too deep and then backed out. But I guess, you know, he's in the Robert Baratheon school of fuck my brother. I have a new brother now, so whatever. We find out later on all these things that Sirius never knew about his brother. And it's like one of those, wow, wish we explored that a bit more moments because, you know, Sirius is dead by Half-Blood Prince. Then we're finding out this whole thing while, oh, look at that, in the main storyline, this little twink Draco is out of his depths and also a very young Death Eater. Oh, and right, these characters are cousins. I wonder if there's a parallel there. And yes, there is a fapping of tragic white men in genre. Abso-fucking-lutely. I just also think it bears acknowledging that the reason there is this desire to explore characters like Snape, like Regulus, and Draco is not just fapping. There is fap, but not all fap. Harry Potter, throughout its length, becomes a text that is attempting to use the imagery and racialized language of chattel slavery, the dynamics of World War II, and British elite classism in a fantasy war between a dark wizard and a good young boy wizard. But it fails to use any of that productively, and the only characters who allow for a deeper exploration of those issues end up being those three annoying fascist wizard boys. Any character who was born into wizard privilege and becomes a good guy, it either A, doesn't appear on the page, B, they are inherently good aligned the whole time, or C, it is explored through exposition. Dumbledore used to believe in wizard supremacy even though he was a half-blood, then he got better. Regulus was gonna be a blood supremacist, but then stopped because of his house elf. Snape was good aligned the whole time, kinda, because he was in love with Lily, but he never stopped being a prick. Draco Malfoy will, according to the semi-canon of Cursed Child, eventually be a good father, no longer believe in blood purity, and becomes a sad, empathetic widow. Off screen. Why? So I don't disagree that there's a problem with the way that white men are platformed in this fandom, but the problem exists within the canon firstly. The Harry Potter fandom largely exists because of things like this. A desire to fix some of these issues, evolve characters, and insert nuance and diversity that the author claims was always there. I've seen fanfiction deal with the conservative nature of the wizarding world in terms of sexuality. I've seen fanfiction give the Malfoy family more consequences for their actions than exist in the books. I've seen fanfiction attempt to deal with what work it would take to really change society. I've literally seen fanfiction come up with gender neutral pronouns for witches and wizards. Like, that has been a recent development, and it has been so great to see people actually doing that work. Even in fanfiction with a heterosexual ship, you will see queer relationships surrounding the story. Fandom has made that happen. Fandom is why Harry Potter fan fiction is what it is, not JKR. But, this is a big but, the intellectual property is still hers. This is why these conversations about these books are complicated and require a lot more care that has been shown in the rollout from some of these publications. From all the quotes about the sandbox and how fandom can help these characters belong to us, I have not seen that metatextual conversation happen in these articles truly. I haven't seen a real discussion of the queer headcanons, the charity works, the donations, anything that highlights what fandom has tried to do in this imperfect situation. Only one article has brought up the fact that despite how queer the most popular relationships are, it has been heterosexual ones being promoted and given these massive book deals. Alyssa Moore is saying there is this whole secret economy of Dramione fan fiction should tell you everything you need to know about this issue, even if you're someone who loves Hermione and is apolitical. Like, this is about money. And not about money to invest in helping these authors navigate new fame in some cases and really make sure that these works can stand on their own. It is spent in using this pre existing popular thing to market these books and then say, oh, but there are queer people involved in the community, so it's fine. Why else would they be selling it this way? Everyone who pays attention knows what these books were. They kept telling us over and over again, but still want to pay lip service to the issue of transphobia and just lip. You can't do both. You can't be using Harry Potter fandom and the literal ship itself to promote interest in these books at the level where 3 publications of merit do articles about it and then say, yeah, transphobia is bad, but whatever. We're not going to say anything too intense because clearly we owe her in some regard for why we're selling these books now. And I think underlined for me when I read these articles and I read how the rollout has happened and how it's being marketed, and the subtext to me feels is that they are saying that the female readership for romantasy is stupid. They are saying, oh, they like these tropes. Let's pump out these books that feed on this current hyperfixation based on what they're reading on AO3, but only the straight stuff. As long as it's spicy, they won't care because they don't read to think. They don't care about politics. They will defend their right to read these books using feminism, even as we make it explicitly clear that we don't respect them as readers because we fear that if we don't feed this genre until the wheels come off, we will lose all of our money. Like, I know that there has always been this gendered discussion about romantasy, about like, is it being hyper critiqued because it's mostly done by women? And as a feminist, as an intersectional feminist, as a Black woman, I have to tell you guys, like, it's because most of it is bad. It's because, and even if it's not bad, when people talk about it on Book Talk, they don't talk about it in a deep, entertaining way. They have really made it look very deeply shallow. Fandom is special, and it is special to a lot of us. And for many of us who were marginalized in fandom, it was in certain ways a place we were allowed to explore thoughts we had with each other. The Harry Potter fandom has always had issues with racism, politics, everything, but it also always contained people who were trying to speak truth to that while having fun. We were bound in our love for this thing and the community that we were building on message boards, Discord servers, a live journal, everything. But JKR's transphobia has forever changed the nature of the fandom because it took a pre existing tension and blew it up. Namely, people who just enjoy Harry Potter uncritically, and those who loved it but were always critical of it. Before 2018, before 2020, there was an ability to passively enjoy Harry Potter, and the worst you would be told is read more books, which is still very true. You should read Robin Hobb. For a lot of people, Harry Potter is the best book series they have ever read, and they don't read. They only love reading because of this book, and because of it, they will love it forever. I really loved Harry Potter. It meant a lot to me. but trans people mean more. And I don't mean that in like a virtue signaling kind of way. I mean it as in JKR, who I used to look up to, is doing horrible things. Giving it up was not easy. And honestly, I'm sure some people would argue that my fanfiction consumption isn't giving it up, that it exists in a gray area. But I did mourn. And what's more so is I mourned in community. I have trans friends who are still mourning this series because it meant a lot to them, who are still navigating this in a very hard way. For my 30th birthday, I spent it sharing a room with some of my queer friends, including beautiful trans woman who I'm friends with, and we had a Luffy downloaded version of the Harry Potter like anniversary edition, and we watched it together and we talked about it because it missing I had them stay here because it's a married couple now and they're both women, one of them is a trans woman, and we talked about Harry Potter and rereading it in the fanfiction. Like, these are real conversations that we have been having, that we need to have, but because of the capitalistic way that everything is being rolled out, we can't have them because people are making money off of it. And so the stakes feel so much higher. And also because, and I think this is a big part of it as well, we feel so powerless in so many ways. And that this is one of the few ways we get to really feel like we have a voice. People have told us that JK is so powerful that whatever we do is insurmountable, that we just can't defeat her. And so, like, we're trying our best, but it ends up being in the situation where we're fighting with these independent authors because they are more accessible. We can impact them more than we can do JKR. They then become a shield against her by proxy. And there are non binary, trans, queer people in my life who have been holding somewhat onto fandom as their safe space because it was all they had left of this community. At this moment, taking the Harry Potter fan base, putting it under a microscope, and vivisecting it in order to make money off of what it has created makes fandom worse. It makes it more isolated and also brings in so many people who do not care about the politics of these characters, the community, trying to protect it, and it stratifies the conversation to not being about JKR's politics and how messy it would be regardless of ships, but to being, in this case, a Dramione-centric conversation about the ship and its merits. And that pisses me off on a personal level because Dramione is political for me. All right, it's time for the shipping portion of the video, shipping discourse portion. Y'all can skip if you want. I'm not really invested in convincing anyone to like what I like, but I did feel like I wanted to contribute something that added like a bit of nuance to the conversation without collapsing it. So I'm putting that here. It is my video and ergo my prerogative. So I think one of my petty complaints about the way Dramione has been centered in this conversation is that it ignores the specificity of those characters and why people would want to explore them together, which flattens it to the cliche of good girl, bad boy, and everyone using like the Pride and Prejudice comparisons. Like, please leave my cousins out of this. Fitzwilliam Darcy called Elizabeth broke, but he did not call her a slur. So let's start there, especially the 1996 version, because right now with Matthew Midfagan and Keira Knightley being in the Audible Harry Potter, meanwhile my Elizabeth Bennet's gonna be in Interview with the Vampire. But I digress. I first read the 4 Harry Potter books out of order. I read it 2-1-4-3. Very confusing, but I made it work. And in the 4th book, there's this scene where Hermione comes down for the Yule Ball in her periwinkle blue dress. And there's a line about how like Draco looked at her and even he couldn't think of anything bad to say. And like a light went off in my brain, my rotted brain, and I was like, interesting. Then I went back and read the 3rd book, and in that she slapped him in the movie as a punch in the face. And I was like, okay, they're getting married. There's no way Hermione and Ron is going to happen. It's so basic and telegraphed. So I assumed it was like red herring. And plus I watched so much anime that to me, like, fighting equal love, and love is how you overcome everything. And then the 6th book, aka Harry Potter Can't Stop Thinking About and Following Draco Malfoy into bathrooms and tight corridors. And then we actually got to see Draco have some development, some doubt in his ideology. Show for the first time real growth and nuance as a character, you know, crying on Moaning Myrtle's lap, especially, like, to have gone from book 2 where he was making jokes about a Muggle-born dying is like, oh, this is big. This is going to be indicative of a moment of him changing. As I mentioned earlier, like Draco comes from a family divided in loyalty about blood purity. His own aunt, Andromeda Tonks, was disowned because she fell in love with a Muggleborn. Like, that is so close in his family tree as a reality, as a tangible thing. Like, that was always my headcanon about like why all of a sudden he's like super duper racist in book 2. Like his parents came home and they were like, oh, you're talking about Hermione Granger? Oh, she's really smart, she's a Muggleborn? Gotta knock that shit out. And so it just spoke to like this evolution of the character, and then it never happened. Nothing happened. And it's not just girl delusion. I remember there used to be on the History Channel like these deep dives into Harry Potter. I know. And everyone speculated that in the last Harry Potter book, there was going to be some kind of real reconciliation, some real moment between Harry and Draco, because they are foils, because they are like meant to be at odds, that there's going to be some interaction, there's going to be some change, and it doesn't happen. You know, Draco doesn't develop, doesn't have a redemption arc, and is largely defined by his inaction. In fact, when I read fan fiction like many years post the series being over about Draco going to Azkaban or having to give some kind of reparations, I assumed, because it was such a prolific element in so many different kind of fic, that it was based off of some like Pottermore bullshit reality that JKR kind of dropped. But it's entirely made up by fans. And for me, what has always made the idea of Draco and Hermione interesting is that them getting together forces the narrative to deal with all of the cultural issues that the text never truly confronts. Draco would have to change, he would have to evolve, and Hermione would get to do something that isn't just about her supporting Harry and Ron. Now, you might say that's still centering her around a man, but I'm not the one who decided that Hermione would have no female friends. That's a question you can ask Joanne. Since 2 of the 3 Dramione stories that have been published, and I know that technically Irresistible is not a reskinned, deal with an element of slavery and commentary about that, I've seen this assumption going around that Dramione fans want Hermione to be humbled, that they want to use her as a way to be with Draco Malfoy by proxy. I can only speak for myself. I got no interest in that. Similarly to Qatar and Avatar the Last Airbender, sometimes you'll have to accept that these female characters are just not as radical as you want them to be. Hermione is not above being with someone with shitty politics. She marries Ron Weasley. Both her friends make fun of her in canon for being against slavery. Now, one thing I do think it's important to understand is that desire is complicated and not always rooted in a pure moral space. You don't have to recommend the ContraPoints video to me. I promise you, I saw it. I'm very aware of it. At the same time, your desires are not divorced from society just because you can intellectualize them. You know, we see the benevolent patriarch constantly put into romance stories with rich men who can change the world of a beautiful, innocent young woman. And my biggest issue with the way certain audiences now talk about romance is that they both acknowledge that it should be taken seriously as a genre and deserves to be taken seriously, but then avoid having serious conversations like the plague. The conversation around Hermione could have been an interesting way to talk about those gender related issues, but unfortunately, the whiteness of some of these people belies their inability to genuinely introspect and think about things. I remember someone saying on Threads that the concept of Hermione goes too far. Give her a mafia romance any day. And I'm like, the intersectional DEI mafia? Mind you, I have no issue with people being turned off by the problematic nature of the ship, and that 2 of these 3 works have to deal with a woman in subjugation. You can say it's not chattel slavery all you want, it's Roman slavery. Like, girl, we're not in Rome, you ain't Roman. Hot take, still bad. Even if it's not chattel slavery, it's still like not great. And there has to be a preparedness to talk about that subject matter beyond taboo romance, especially when there is an embedded fantastical racialized element in the canon. And that is a conversation worth having, especially at a time where we are dealing with again, a rise in trad wives, a rise in anti-intellectualism, a rise in conservatism, especially amongst young men, and a lot of isolation being at the root of that. And that makes it an interesting thing to discuss, especially because the wizarding world is, by the nature of how it was constructed by JKR, very insular. And so what you have is a relationship dynamic with really Draco and anyone of the main cast, a possibility to discuss those issues. And for me, as a descendant of chattel slavery, the elements that I find interesting about Dramione are that A, I like that Dramioni's muggle-born identity matters beyond the allegory in those fics, that it informs her politics, her navigation of the wizarding society, but also the struggle to connect back with her parents. A lot of fic have her deal tragically in some ways with her erasing her parents' memory, and it either not being an easy fix or something that has long-lasting consequences to their relationship. And, B, I live in the real world where privileged white men don't change or deal with the consequences of their actions, and fandom Draco does. The best versions of him in fanon, are him dealing with the deconstructional work of having been raised in a truly isolationist place and having to unpack that to do better and having the means to do so. And C, I love when he knows that he will never be good enough for Hermione, and his job is to make her happy and let her spend all of his money. He's a reparational bottom. I think that's great. Spend his money. One of the struggles I've had with making this video and touching on the issue of fandom in Harry Potter is that I genuinely don't have perfect answers, and I think striving for perfection can sometimes be the enemy of good. But I understand why we are in this place. And I think if you're paying attention, it's very clear why the frustration exists. If you were to ask me if writing and reading Harry Potter fanfiction inherently helps J.K. Rowling, I would have said no. Like, I read Hermione fanfiction, but I haven't bought a licensed Harry Potter product since The Cursed Child. What appeals to me in fanfiction are not things explored in Harry Potter. Someone seeking out Harry Potter because they've read a piece of Dramione fanfiction or Marauders fanfiction on like an intellectual level makes no sense to me. Like, Draco and Hermione barely interact. We still to this day don't have on page a truly canonical reason as to why Peter Pettigrew betrayed his best friends. But what has changed is who is participating in fandom and how that is changing because of book talk. Book talk exists to sell things to people. Bound fanfiction has always been something that was an issue, but these intense, fully blinged out fanfiction titles exist to sit on shelves to show off. They are another kind of labubu. And also, I think there is a responsibility of dealing with the ramifications of the creators and that you love doing something especially heinous. If we want to go to the fan fiction, statistics, the Good Omens couple, they were like the top ship. And under what happened with Neil Gaiman and the allegations against him and how he responded to it, that fandom has not, it dropped 44 points, 44, 45 points. People were not making new work of it anymore. People were really grappling with the reality, someone that they love, someone that they really respected. I respected him, did horrible things. The Sandman got canceled. The Nazi Boys got canceled. We saw in real time a superior writer with a decades of material get put to the side. People said no. And so you realize in that moment how capitalism plays a role in anything, because Warner Brothers would not do that to JKR because they have invested so much money in her company, and they are hoping that you have too. Dramione is being used to sell tropes, and that wouldn't be horrible if not for the fact that the owner of that intellectual property and the politics that come along with that. And it could have been done differently. What has happened instead has done several kinds of damage. It has continued to illustrate that trans and non-binary rights are not a serious line in the sand for people. It has pitted authors against each other. And even if you only care about the fan fiction aspect of it, it has brought us back in time when it comes to the true legitimacy of going from fanfiction to traditionally published works. Harry Potter fanfiction didn't have to be something that put money into JKR's pocket, but by it being used as a marketing element in spaces like Book Talk that are used to sell you something via influence. As someone who attended New York Comic Con this year and saw countless ads for the upcoming Audible Harry Potter release, and then a giant alchemized banner that is there as you walk into one of the entrances. You're not beating the allegations. Of course, people are going to think that you're paying J.K. Rowling, because how is this happening? If this rollout was meant to show how authors, including queer ones, could reclaim fandom for themselves, it failed because no one is talking about these books as just their own works. That being said, if you do want to support some works by trans and non-binary folks, here are some slightly gratuitous plugs. My friend Sav Rogers is working on Pancake Skank. Andy Stevenson's new work is out, Scarlet Morning, a middle grade read, which is really exciting. I did not get to go to their panel for Comic-Con, but as you know, I am the biggest. Do I have She-Ra behind me? Yeah, I do. My friend Rose Domu's new book, Best Woman, is out and it's fabulous. It is like a trans queer not kind of like reimagining inspired by My Best Friend's Wedding, and it is so funny, so clever. I genuinely love this book and I'm so excited that it's out and that they're just having an amazing time, and she's the reason why I went to Publix for the first time. A new Alexis Hall book. I love Alexis Hall. Their work is so fun, and this is their latest one. Katie Roberts has Tender Cruelty, the next installment in their Dark Olympus series, and this one is Zeus and Hera. Like, if Hermione got erased from the universe tomorrow, I would live because I still have Zutara and Hades too. So I will be okay. I just want people to stop being weird. And I just really would like some of these very pretentious romance people to just realize, especially like my biggest pet peeve when white women say, especially, Hermione's too smart and too independent to be with Draco Malfoy. He's a bigot. White women marry bigots all the time. That's not. That is not. If you're trying to prove to me it can't be canon, I'm sorry. I read them. I read them articles every election season. I'm canceling out my husband's vote. Okay, Draco has the excuse of literally being 17 years old and raised in like a deeply, deeply insular mini community. Your husband does not.
What the hell is this? You expect me to sing about her? I don't care about her.
I don't know where we go from here. I think that this Dramione trend is a drop in the bucket and that eventually we will move on to something else. But right now we are seeing a push to put Harry Potter into the world in some form apolitically. TikTok keeps doing these stupid hashtags with the Krispy Kremes and the Harry Potter deck boxes. Like, seriously, Ultra Pro, what were you thinking? You know, Audible keeps releasing this Harry Potter cast list where once again, Snape is a man of color. Like, what the fuck are you guys, like, what the fuck is happening? And it feels like this is all a setup to rile everyone up for this new Harry Potter TV series, to get people comfortable with the idea that you can separate these characters from JKR, that it belongs to you. And so it doesn't matter what JKR thinks. She's not the only voice out there. Yeah, she gets paid for all of it, but she was going to be rich anyway. Don't worry about it. That's what they want you to believe. That's what they're kind of microdosing you with all of this. And I don't personally appreciate my OTP being used as a marketing tool to soft launch death of the author marketing around Harry Potter. I don't appreciate the genuine talent of fanfiction authors being taken advantage of by people who think capitalism is the point of creating all kinds of art. And I don't appreciate the really complex narratives about gender and race and fantasy, including in this ship, being flattened into generic buzzwords because that is an easy selling point. I think all the authors in this conversation are talented people. I wish I could speak to them. And I don't think any of them were fully prepared for what this rollout was going to bring out. But they should have been. Fan fiction, Harry Potter fan fiction, has been made into traditionally published books before. We can tell. It's very obvious if you know. But I think from the moment that it became a mainstream marketing tool, it set off a lot of red flags, which have only multiplied no matter what the fandom was. If this had been me, and I had written some Dramione fan fiction, which I have not done, I promise, into a book, I wouldn't have wanted to promote it using Dramione explicitly. And if I had done like a shaving the serial numbers thing off and people ask me what I felt, this is what I would have said. I would have said, when I first started writing fan fiction, Draco and Hermione were a way of dealing with all the issues I had with Harry Potter. Their relationship allowed Hermione to be the focus and give a character like Draco a real character arc. When it started blowing up on TikTok, it was exciting but also overwhelming because, legal issues aside, I don't want my work to be tied to JKR. Her politics have already made it feel ick to even still be part of that cultural property in any way. And for me, this is an opportunity to really dig into what I felt was incomplete in her story and make my own that focused on a female lead and de-radicalization and having queerness and trans people at the forefront of a fantasy series. Because I feel at the end, if we want to give her less power, we need to invest in other art. And I just want to be another part of queer art that people invest in and invest back into them through what I do. Imagine the difference that would have made. Right now, online, there have been a lot of conversations about privacy and communication. Freedom of speech and government regulation around it has increased, which would be surprising if there wasn't an entire document saying that was going to happen. Thankfully, among the ways you can protect your conversations is with Proton Mail. But you might be asking, why does secure email matter and what does it have to do with the government? Under Section 702 of the 2008 FISA Amendments Act, the U.S. government is allowed to monitor foreign nationals outside the United States without a warrant. The NSA can name a foreign national outside the U.S. as a target, but if that target speaks with a U.S. citizen or someone in the U.S., that means those communications, emails, texts, or phone calls can also be taken. We are also in a situation when citizenship is no longer cut and dry, even for those of us who were born here but might have immigrant parents. Proton is protected by Swiss privacy laws that forbid all Swiss companies from assisting foreign law enforcement under threat of criminal penalty. It is a much higher protection than exists in the United States, which has been backed in court. Also, Proton services use end-to-end encryption or zero-access encryption, which makes it impossible for anyone to see the content of your emails, files, etc. without your permission. That includes Proton itself. This is the case for all of Proton services, Proton Mail, Proton Drive, and Proton VPN. Switching to Proton Mail couldn't be easier. With the built-in Easy Switch tool, you can move all your emails, contacts, and calendars from your old account, like Gmail, straight to Proton Mail. Everything transfers safely and is encrypted as soon as it lands in your inbox. Keep your data private today with Proton Mail. Sign up for free using my link proton.me/princessweeks.